Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, and I'm sorry for the little bit of a delay in the streaming. I was having some audio problems at like the worst possible time, so I just had to go ahead and fix that. I was wondering what the problem was, but I finally figured it out. And so in this segment, like in this podcast for today, there isn't really like how should I say? I guess like there isn't really big news that's like that exciting to talk about now. And like this is it's sort of like we're just waiting for some big basketball news, and we're just waiting for the Olympics to start. That's really like sort of where we're at right now in the time of the summer. So it's like the news is kind of it's a bit underwhelming, but I'm still going to, figure out ways to talk about it. So the first segment it's going to be like it's going to be a little bit dull because we are going to be talking about the new TV media rights deal that the NBA just recently signed, and really like going into just, how the split from Warner Brothers is working, Warner Bros. Discovery particular, the split from TNT, the group as well, just talking a little bit about that and what that means for the NBA, because we already talked about how there were talks of new TV media rights deals going around, and it was resolved. And one of the things that I mentioned like in some of the previous podcasts when I did this was that Warner Brothers and TNT, they had the right to match their deal and see if they had the right to match between ESPN and Amazon's deal with TV and media rights. So, and they ended up doing that, but things still ended up falling short. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of the riskiest offseason moves in the NBA. And then in the third segment, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of ESPN recently, they made a list of the top 100 athletes in the 21st century. And then afterwards, they made a list of the top 25 athletes in the 21st century of the NBA, like top 25 basketball athletes. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some contract signings, because there's only one free agency contract to really talk about, and the New York Knicks recently made a move to keep Thibodeau for 3 more years. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about both of those in the fourth segment. We also have a special fifth segment that I like to reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcspodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is gsmcspodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and talk about the NBA parting ways with TNT and Warner Brothers Discovery. And, it's a sad day for all of those super diehard NBA fans, because I know the picture quality on this is awful, but, I had to make do with what I could. And so now the NBA they were talking about signing a $76 billion media rights deal for 11 years. And now that, that has finally been put into motion. And so this new media rights deal is going to change the lineup of partners after this coming season with the NBA, ending its decades-long relationship with the cable network TNT and entering a new partnership with Amazon. So that's sort of like that's sort of the idea and what's going to happen with this new deal, even after TNT ends up matching. And this goes to show that it's more about the money, and it's never about what the fans actually want, because this deal for the NBA, like them signing this deal was strictly driven by money, and a lot of the fans and a lot of the like the hardcore fans of everyone that watches the NBA, part of the reason why a lot of them find it enjoyable, and one of the things that actually adds enjoyment from a lot of NBA fans in watching the NBA is watching the TNT halftime show and watching the post game show, because Shaq, Chuck, Kenny, and Ernie, they're all like fan favorites. Everyone loves hearing their takes, and they also love making fun of Chuck, and they also love how Shaq makes fun of Chuck, and they also really like how, basically everyone on that board has a ring aside from Chuck, and that's one of the reasons why everyone makes fun of him. And it's one of those like bright sides and one of those like positive things about NBA and NBA basketball. Once the playoffs roll around, it gets even better, and the the pre-game interviews, the post-game interviews, and the halftime interviews and the halftime talks, they become full of guests. Like there would be a lot of guests on the show, and like there was a time when Paul George and Joel Embiid were actually helping TNT and Inside the NBA, and they were pretty good. I mean, obviously, having NBA players in a pregame interview, like having NBA talents on that board and talking about it provides a lot more insight than what you just get from Shaq and Chuck. Because while I do like their commentary is like they did play in a league where it was, they did play in the league like before everyone else, and the game was sort of different. So their takes and their opinions might not necessarily be lined up with everyone else's takes and opinions right now. So, continuing on with what this article had to say, the league issued a statement Wednesday saying TNT parent Warner Brothers Discovery did not match the terms offered by Amazon, which will reportedly pay about $1.8 billion annually for the rights to stream NBA games on Prime Video. NBC, Universal, and Walt Disney Co.'s ESPN will be the television outlets for the NBA. The statement noted that the league sought a streaming partner to, quote, maximize the reach and accessibility of our games for fans. Streaming has become the platform of choice for young viewers who are bypassing traditional pay TV services. Our new arrangement with Amazon supports this goal by complementing broadcast cable and streaming packages that are already part of our new Disney and NBC Universal arrangements. The league said all three partners have also committed to substantial services to promote the league and enhance the fan experience. So, at least, these are just the quotes, and these are just like the terms of the agreement, by the way. So, TNT indicated it will not go away quietly, and there's allegedly going to be lawyers involved with this. Like, TNT is bringing in their lawyers. Now, quote, we think the NBA has grossly misinterpreted our contractual rights with respect to the 2025-2026 season and beyond, and we will take appropriate action, the Warner Brothers Discovery-owned unit said in a statement. The deal makes Amazon's Prime Video a bigger powerhouse to the TV sports business thanks to its deep pockets. Now, obviously, Amazon Prime, now they have rights to, stream NFL games, and like Amazon already has it's already a player in live sports streaming arena because of its Thursday night football package. So it's like, every single Thursday night, even though I don't like it, I always got to put on Amazon Prime in order to watch football. And even though like I would much rather watch it on the cable, it does make it a little bit easier to watch these, to watch these teams on the go, because, I could pull up my phone and I can watch the game while it's being streamed on my phone a little bit easier than I could if it was on a cable sports channel. Now, the NBA more than doubled the rights fees of its current package in another example of how live sports leagues have seen their value escalate in the media landscape, disrupted by streaming video. Live sports are must-have properties for a lot of TV networks, and they're no longer the first stop for scripted dramas and comedies. But tech companies getting into the video business also want sports to create greater scale for their streaming businesses, and leagues realize that streamers are the go-to source for a lot of the younger fans, as opposed to being attracted to the older audience, even though I think it should be a little bit of a balance between both. Like, I would have much rather have the NFL games on cable as opposed to them, even though I love streaming them on my phone. I would much rather to do that because that's just, it's simpler. But I digress. Now, Prime Video is going to carry like about 66 regular season games and the NBA Cup, a mid-season tournament launched last year, in case you guys don't know what that is. And the streaming service is also going to get the NBA's play-in tournament rights as well, in which the teams ranked between the 7th and the 10th. You guys know what the play-in is, but it's really starting to look like that, Prime Video is going to take over NBA basketball, similar to how it's trying to take over the NFL, but it's not really going to get there. Now, Comcast is going to pay $2.5 billion for its package, which includes 100 regular season games, and the deal features 50 games for its streaming platform Peacock, a boost for the service with 30 million subscribers, which is lagging behind such competitors as Netflix, Max, and Paramount Plus. So, really, one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people have Peacock was to watch Caitlin Clark and to watch the Iowa games and the WNBA games, and the streaming the streaming viewership went through the roof with those women's playoff games. So NBC is also going to have national game on Sunday nights following the NFL playoffs, and regional coverage on Tuesday nights. It will also have exclusive rights to the first round of the NBA playoffs, and will have the conference finals every other year, starting with the 2025 and the 2026 season. So, and there's a lot more deals with like a lot of other media companies. Walt Disney's companies, ESPN remains the home of the NBA Finals, so they're going to keep the NBA Finals on ESPN, and this will continue to air on broadcast network ABC as it has since 2003. ESPN is also going to carry 80 regular season games, with more than 20 appearing on ABC. Disney is also going to pay $2.6 billion per year, up from $1.4 billion on the current deal. So, this is all about the money, and this TV deal hits the NBA in exactly the right spots where they need it, and bringing global attentions, or a little bit of global attention, to the NBA is exactly what Adam Silver wants. Like, he basically envisions like a league where the entire world is just part of the NBA. But I don't know how he's going to get to that part, but we'll see. So that's it for the first segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the second segment right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC basketball podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, I'm going to be just going over some of the teams whom I feel made the riskiest moves in the offseason. Therefore, that's why the segment is called, riskiest offseason. So we could just see, this is talking about, whether it be free agent signings, whether it be trades, whether it be whether it be draft decisions, things like that. It's going to be about all of that. So, and now that the actual trade details of a lot of teams have been announced, I figured out and have been officially decided, I might as well just go ahead and list off some of the riskiest moves that I've seen, or that are just in my opinion. So it's I'm not gonna go in any particular order of which I think is the worst, but I am going to be listing what's in my top 5. But before I begin, I would like to remind everybody to please go ahead and to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and go into some of these risky off-season moves in the NBA so far, because again, the off-season is still it's still kind of fresh, and while obviously there are no big time free agent players remaining in free agency, there are a couple. So the biggest one of the riskiest moves in the offseason is by far the Lakers not doing anything. No, not really. That's unfortunately, the Lakers, they aren't going to make this list, even though they probably should make this list, because let's face it, not doing anything in the entire offseason is probably one of the riskiest moves for the entire NBA. But aside from that, I'll actually give you some of the moves that teams actually did, as opposed to some moves that teams didn't do. So the Timberwolves, they invested in guard Rob Dillingham. If you guys probably remember me talking about him in the previous segments when I graded him as an A for his summer league performance, and just the fact that the Timberwolves ended up picking him up. So he looked like they're probably going to forget that he was originally picked by the San Antonio Spurs on draft night, right? And people thought that he would be a phenomenal guard to pair with Victor, because they're both young and they both show a lot of promise. So giving Victor that young guard to sort of complement his game is sort of what the Spurs are looking forward and what they're trying to do. But it was later announced, literally right after he signed the contract, right after he got drafted by the Spurs, he was then traded to the Timberwolves, literally directly after he was drafted. And it was, a lot of people were very, very surprised that the Spurs were even going to trade this guard. And the fact that he would be moving to Minnesota, it was seen as rather risky, seeing as, it seemed like the Timberwolves already had their guards. So the Timberwolves brought a fair amount of shock and questions surrounding the trade and what exactly the Wolves ended up giving up in their assets for the guard, right? Now, Minnesota, they not only agreed to give up its only tradable future first round pick, the unprotected 2031 selection, but they also gave the Spurs the right to swap first rounders in 2030, the top one projected pick. And according to ESPN's Bobby Marks, a first-year salary of $6.3 million for Dillingham also meant paying an extra $28 million in luxury taxes next season. So this means that Dillingham is going to cost the Wolves $34.3 million next season, or roughly what players like Jason Tatum and SGA, Donovan Mitchell, and Tyrese Maxey is going to earn. So Minnesota's current tax bill has since moved from $105.6 million to $311 million. So that's the total roster cost. And no other moves have been made. Ignoring the financial ramifications is like ignoring all of the things that this does for your team financially. This is a pretty good move in terms of like building the team, right? Because, you add another young guard that can develop his game along with all the other young players that you have for the team. And they also were able to add significant talent through free agency and only entered the draft with numbers 27 and 37 in terms of like their overall picks. Now, getting a player as talented as Dillingham to come in and learn behind an outstanding veteran like Mike Conley is something that I've been saying is going to be a good thing for the longest time. So, really, I think, Dillingham is going to be a big part of this team's future. So this is sort of a move that I feel like it is risky, but it could come in with such a nice and high reward. Now, the next move on this list is the Knicks trading 6 first-round picks and swaps for Mikal Bridges. Now, I recently said that this trade was like, it accomplished both teams, like the goals of both teams. They wanted the Nets wanted to rebuild, like completely rebuild, and the Knicks wanted to contend, and they also wanted to do it with someone who used to be teammates with a majority of the Knicks squad, the Villanova people, right? Like Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, and Mikal Bridges. They've all played on the exact same Villanova team, and they all have that chemistry. So it's like this trade, at first, I thought it was really, really good. But then I sort of, I thought it accomplished something that both sides really wanted. But then I found out exactly what the Knicks had to give up and what they're giving to Brooklyn in response to them giving them Mikal. So they gave up a 2025 first round pick, a 2027 and 2029 and 2031 first round pick and 2025, and then they also they gave a 2028 first round pick swap and a 2025 second round pick swap, as well as Bojan Bogdanovic. This is a hefty trade, and this, in terms of like the hindsight, Bridges is not going to be worth all of these players. Like, I'm a big fan of Bridges. He was a fantastic player for the Knicks. Not for the Knicks. The Nets. He averaged 14 points, 4 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 1.2 steals in his last full season with the Phoenix Suns. And while he did play pretty, decent, while he did play pretty decently for the Nets, he's never going to be worth all that money. And all those picks. It's like, it could be a similar situation with the Paul George deal, and we know how badly that turned south. So, this kind of package, I don't know if it's really worth Bridges, but, like, I also don't think that the Knicks will regret this move either, because, they ultimately got exactly what they wanted, all of the players from Villanova on the same team. So, next on this list is the Grizzlies and drafting Zach Edey at the number 9 overall pick. Now, I recently said that, Zach Edey's performance in the Summer League, it was all right, wasn't entirely good, and it wasn't entirely bad. And I also said that, Zach Edey has the potential of being one of the best big men or being a bust. And it's like, it's really difficult to determine exactly what he's going to be. A lot of people consider him, just Boban, like, the really tall Boban that used to play for the Houston Rockets. And, the fact that that's what people argue his ceiling is just shows, like, the talent in this NBA's draft. Like, now Zach Edey, he's just polarizing like that. And so seeing him get drafted to the number 9 overall is, a lot of people argue it's one of the worst picks in draft history. Like, Kristen Peak of Yahoo Sports does not agree with the Grizzlies taking Zach Edey at number 9 at all. Like, does not agree with it. Now, while a trade up for Donovan Clingan would have been the ideal outcome, like, because I had a feeling that, the Grizzlies, they needed a center. I just didn't think that drafting this particular center was the best option. But I digress. So I feel like, this is one of the riskiest moves because we have no idea the ceiling that Zach Edey really has. Ceiling. But, like, yeah, he's tall enough to reach any ceiling, but it's like, is that ceiling going to be top big man in the NBA? I'm not entirely sure. So we are close to ending off this list, and I'll go ahead and I'll speed through some of these just because, like, actually, you know what? Nah, I won't speed through any of these. I don't really need to speed. Next is Bulls. Like, they ended up trading Alex Caruso in exchange for Josh Giddey. And, one of the reasons why Josh Giddey requested a trade from OKC was because he wasn't happy with the role that he was going to have on this team. So, or the role that he was going to be if he were to stay with the Oklahoma City Thunder. He did not want to move to the bench. He would have much rather preferred being a starter. And really, I don't really see the Chicago Bulls, like, having good seasons with Giddey in the starting lineup, but that's just me, and that's sort of like one of the only reasons why I actually have this as a risky move, just because, I don't trust Giddey. Next on this, and finally, like, the final thing on this list is the 76ers. They give Paul George a massive $212 million contract for 4 years. Again, like, I'm sure all of you guys, exactly just, Paul George's injury history. Like, that's not even why I am worried. Even though I should worry, like, the Sixers should worry about this deal and the fact that he is rather injury prone. I'm more focused on the fact that on whether or not the Sixers are actually going to go far in this postseason after acquiring these players. Because now that they're giving Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Maxey so much money, and I'm not entirely sure how that's going to fare with salary cap and the new CBA rules, but one thing that I do know is that the 76ers have struggled to make it out of the first round, and here they bring in someone who is, like, known for struggling in the postseason, and they don't expect to struggle in the postseason? But, I digress. Again, anything can happen in this offseason. Well, not in this offseason, but anything can happen in the NBA. So really, like, who knows? Maybe this is exactly what they needed in order to beat the Celtics. But again, I don't really feel like this roster can really compete with the Celtics, despite bringing in a pretty competent small forward. But that's all I have. So next, we will go ahead and go into the third segment, where I talk about the top 25 NBA athletes. ESPN recently made a list about it, so I'm just going to talk about it right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. I will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, I'm going to be reading off a list of, this was a list made by ESPN. They are talking about, it's a list about the top 25 NBA athletes of the 21st century. So I'm just going to, talk a little bit about that, talk about the players and, who I think should be on the list, who I think deserves to be on the list, this, that, and the other, whether or not I agree with the player being on the list or whether or not I don't agree with the player being on the list. You're going to hear all of that in this third segment. Him is in the chat once again. How's it going, Him? Now, let's go right ahead and start on with the list. So, obviously, the number one athlete and the number one NBA athlete of the 21st century is LeBron James. There's just no question about it, no ifs, ands, or buts. And it should also be noted that LeBron is also on, I believe he's fourth on top 100 athletes in the 21st century, because ESPN, they recently did a list about, the top athletes of the 21st century. So it's top athletes, so it's not just basketball, it's in every single, American sport. I think Messi is like number 3 on that list. I think Tom Brady is like 5th on that list, maybe. But yeah, it's every single athlete, and I know like there's so many athletes on the regular list that I just couldn't talk about at all. And I'm pretty sure that, I know that the first few picks on this list, they are also they're ranked chronologically from the list of top 100. So if any NBA players made the top 100 list, they would be in this order. So number 1 is LeBron James. Obviously, he is the best athlete of the 21st century. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if anyone doesn't agree with the fact that he is just, the best athlete of the 21st century, I don't know what to tell you, because a lot of people, they like to make the argument that he's not the best ever, but I'm sure no one can really make an argument for him not being the best in the 21st century. I think everyone can agree that he is by far the best athlete of this generation. But, that is still just my opinion. So the next player on this list is Kobe Bryant. Now, a lot of people are honestly, I was a little bit surprised that he was ranked this high, just because, ESPN doesn't really take kindly to ranking Kobe, super high in terms of, best basketball players ever, right? He's on the bottom 10 of the top 10 NBA basketball players, at least according to ESPN, most of the time on these lists. So I'm pretty surprised seeing him ranked the second best athlete on this entire list. Obviously, he is a 2-time finals MVP, a 1-time regular season MVP, a 5-time NBA champion, an 18-time All-Star, and a 15-time All-NBA selection, 12-time All-NBA defense, 4-time All-Star Game MVP. Like, the list goes on and on. He is arguably one of the, like, he's arguably the closest athlete to MJ that isn't MJ. Like, when people think of MJ's play style, everyone just immediately remembers Kobe Bryant just, copying that play style and arguably perfecting it to play in today's league, because Kobe is one of the very few athletes that played in the early, in the late 1990s, as well as playing in the early 2000s and in the late 2000s and even the late 2010s. He's played in a lot of different eras with basketball. He was there when the league shifted its focus from mid-range shooting to three-point shooting and this, that, and the other. He's obviously a huge icon of the sport. One of the most favorite basketball players, period. In 2008, when he went over on the Olympics, when he went over to China, everyone knew who Kobe was over there, and it was just, wow. It opened up everyone's eyes. Next player on this list is Stephen Curry. Now, if there was any player that sort of would take LeBron's shine for best player in 2010s, it would arguably be Stephen Curry. Like, aside from LeBron dominating in the early 2010s, Steph Curry was the player that was dominating in the late 2010s all the way back in 2015. And the Warriors, they've been a dynasty for the longest time. Now is one of the very few times where it seems like the Warriors can't really win anything with Stephen Curry. And, ever since 2015 and ever since, 2014, the Warriors have always been just a big threat. Now, him in the chat, he said Wemby next. I'm calling it. He probably will be on the list of players that, dominates an entire decade. But next on this list, that's not happening, simply because this is just best athletes of the 21st century and, the best NBA players of the 21st century, and Wemby literally just started. So, but if you do mean that he's going to be the next player to just, dominate eras, that's probably true, aside from maybe Luka. But next player on this list is Tim Duncan. Again, similar to Victor and similar to David Robinson, he was a number 1 pick for the Spurs, and he is a Hall of Famer, obviously, arguably the best power forward in the history of the NBA. He was selected 13 times to be an All-NBA player. He was also a 13-time All-Defensive player, 14-time NBA All-Star, a 2-time MVP, a 2-time Finals MVP, and aside from, he's one of the very few players that was this close to reaching a 6-0 Finals record, but it took LeBron to prevent Tim Duncan from winning not 6 straight finals, but preventing Tim Duncan from having a 6-0 Finals record. He has a 5-1 Finals record. Obviously, the only Finals game that he lost was the only Finals game that he lost, or the only final series that he lost, was against LeBron James, and in 2013, that was the year. So that was really the only, I wouldn't even call it a stain, because he still made it to the finals, but it's just, that 3-point shot that Ray Allen hit at the end is really going to be remembered for a very long time. Next player on this list for ESPN is Shaq. So far, Shaq is probably not going to like being ranked lower than Kobe Bryant, but I believe the reason why he was ranked lower is because the longevity that Kobe Bryant has over Shaq is far better. Shaq might have had the better peak years, but Kobe had the better longevity, as well as just being, the finals MVPs and the finals appearances, and just the fact that he has 3 of those is just far better than the fact that Kobe Bryant only has 2 of those. On top of that, his time with the Orlando Magic is also nothing to really scoff at, despite the fact that they didn't really win anything over there. But so far, this list is going pretty good. I mean, you can't really complain about this list all that much. Next player on this list is Kevin Garnett. Now, Kevin Garnett is, he's one of those rather polarizing players. Aside from Tim Duncan, right, and maybe even Dirk, this is arguably one of the best power forwards that the league has seen. Now, he only has 1 championship, and the biggest reason for, just that 1 championship is because he, formed the Boston Celtics. They had a big 3, and this was arguably, the only reason why he has a championship ring. But he gets a lot of criticism for that being the only time he won a championship. But his time on the Timberwolves, he had no help. There was no player on the Timberwolves that was good enough to help him. He actually is one of the few players to lead an entire franchise in everything. He leads the Timberwolves in points, leads the Timberwolves in rebounds, leads in assists, all of that. And KD actually he comes up on this list, but he doesn't come up as soon as you would think. Jokic is next on this list. That's where my problem with ESPN is sort of it's starting to be a little more apparent, because Jokic being on this list this early is a problem to me, because I mean Jokic he has MVPs, right? He has championships, he has finals MVPs, but I feel like he is a little bit too young to be on this list. I think one of the biggest reasons why he's on this list so high, and so early, is because he was able to overcome 2 3-1 leads in the bubble, and that was the only time in the history of basketball that's happened. And on top of that, he is the best passing big man that the league has seen. So, I mean, I understand top 10, yes, he should be in the top 10, but I don't think he should be 7th, especially over the next guy on this list, Dwayne Wade, because I feel I don't know, I just have nostalgia, and I really like D. Wade. Aside from Kobe Bryant, this was the best shooting guard in the 2000s and the 2010s, and it's not even close. This is by far the best shooting guard. And he has 3 championships. He also has a finals MVP. I think he is the only player in the top 10 that does not have an MVP. He is the only player in the top 10 that does not have a regular season MVP. But, aside from that, him being at 8 is definitely respectable, and I really like that. Next on this list is, it's finally Kevin Durant. And while I do think he should have probably been a little bit higher than some of the players on this list, I don't think he should be ranked higher than Giannis, who is a little bit lower on this list. And I mean, I feel like me personally, I would put KD over someone like Jokic, but at the same time, I could understand if you wouldn't want him over someone like Jokic, simply because Kevin Durant, he needed his championships, and the only way to get his championships was by joining a ridiculously stacked team in the Golden State Warriors, basically making the NBA a little unwatchable. So, and also, I'm going to continue on with this list a little bit in the next segment, now that I think about it, because we are running out of time for this 3rd segment. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this list in the 4th segment right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, I'm just going to go ahead and continue on with the list. I know that I had a plan to do something else in the fourth segment, but I feel like this list is a little bit more intriguing to some people, and I also feel like there's way more to talk about with this list because it's not over. And he had something to say in the chat. I don't know what you mean by 2007. What player are you talking about, and what does that mean? Because I have no idea what 2007 means. But aside from that, we left off on Kevin Durant, who was ranked 9th on this list. I personally, again, I've said before, I probably would have ranked him just, a little bit higher. But if you don't want him in the top 10 athletes, I can understand that as well, because I would rank someone like Giannis as better than, Kevin Durant, at least all time. But, I can understand why. I could understand both ways. The only reason why I personally have Giannis over Kevin Durant all time is because Giannis has, he has the defense. His offense is it's a little bit less than Kevin Durant's offense, but he was able to beat him in the 2021 finals. And he was also, again, Kevin Durant, he needed the Golden State Warriors in order to be great and in order to be cemented in history with a championship, where Giannis was able to stay with his team and be, the face of his team. He might not have been the closer, but he was by far the face of the team. So next player on this list, and the last player in the top 10, is Dirk Nowitzki. So he arguably one of the best foreign players to ever play in the NBA. He is a 2011 NBA champion, 2011 Finals MVP, a 2007 MVP, as well as a 14-time All-Star and a 12-time All-NBA. He's arguably one of the best power forwards that the league has seen, and he arguably one of the best shooting big men that the league has seen as well. He was probably the first power forward that was more heavy on the offensive side of the ball than he was on the defensive side of the ball. He played around the same time Kevin Garnett was there, and one of the things that separated Kevin Garnett from Dirk was Kevin Garnett's, presence on the defense. And while Kevin Garnett, and that was why a lot of people usually gave Kevin Garnett that edge, because Kevin Garnett was able to play both offense and play defense at a very efficient rate. Similar to this next player on this list, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, similar to Dirk Nowitzki, he is also a power forward who is fighting to hold the title as best international player in the history of basketball, as well as, I completely forgot. Dirk started that trend. Jokic is, successfully pulling off that trend, and Giannis is also successfully pulling off that trend as well, as being one of the best foreign players that the league has ever seen. So he's the Greek Freak. They obviously don't call him that for nothing. He ended up winning a championship in 2021. He won 2 MVPs as well as a Defensive Player of the Year in 2019-2020. He was an All-Star Game MVP. He's been in the All-Star several times. He's been the Most Improved Player, 5-time All-Defensive Team. I mean, he's one of the best players that the league has ever seen. And really, while he is dominant on the offensive side, he is extremely dominant on the defensive side. And that's really, one of the biggest difference makers with a lot of people on this list. It's the fact that he has ridiculous offense as well as ridiculous defense. And he is arguably he's like the Victor before Victor, if anything. He's this tall, lanky looking slender man guy that's just that could just dominate anyone just because of how much taller he is. And it's like, the only difference between him and Victor is that Victor has a respectable jump shot. And that's like the only thing that Giannis is really lacking. And he doesn't really need to have a jump shot because he's just so dominant everywhere else. Next is Steve Nash. And I mean, hold on, him in the chat. He says, if Dame isn't on this list, this is a great list. It's not a hot take. Dame should not be on this list. I mean, the only thing that Damian Lillard has on his resume is the Mickey Mouse MVP and one conference finals appearance. That's the only thing that he has on this list, and he's not going to make this list. Like, he won't. I was excuse me. I wasn't expecting him to make this list, like, before I looked at this list either. Like, I knew he wasn't making this list. Like, by far was not making it. No questions about it. And not that Damian Lillard is, was bad, but it's just like there's so many other guards and there's so many other players that played better in the 21st century than Dame. And he's a bit overrated. I mean, Steve Nash, he has 2 MVPs, and he was an 8-time NBA All-Star as well as a 7-time All-NBA player, and he led the league in assists for 5 seasons. Like, he also has a 50-40-90 season, and he's arguably one of the best point guards that the league has seen, in charge of one of the best offenses that the league has seen. Now, next on this list, number 13, kind of ironic, because number 13 is James Harden, and he's one of the only players ranked this high that doesn't have a championship, and this is this was one of the things that sort of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way about James Harden and his career, and also one of the very few reasons why he's not ranked even higher on this list. Same with Steve Nash. Like, Steve Nash isn't ranked higher because he doesn't have championships. These guys are ranked based off of, the rest of the accomplishments with this league. Now, Harden, he's arguably one of the best scorers that the league has ever seen. When he was on Houston, he was an absolute monster, scoring 40 points on almost every single night. And again, the only real problem with his career, aside from his defense, is just the fact that he has no NBA championships. Like, that's really the big problem with this, with James Harden and his career. Now, next on this list is Jason Kidd. Now, I personally think that Jason Kidd should be ranked a little bit higher than James Harden, but, given the fact that Jason Kidd has made, 2 finals appearances, like, where he was the best player on the team, as opposed to James Harden, where he made 0, or actually, no, 1 NBA finals, and he wasn't even the best player on his team. However, Jason Kidd, a lot of people, they also forget that Jason Kidd also ended up winning a ring with the Dallas Mavericks with Dirk Nowitzki in 2011. So he does have a ring on his resume. It's just he wasn't the best player on the team, and he wasn't really leading the team in much during his championship run. But, aside from that, being ranked in the 14th spot is definitely nothing short of impressive. And then here comes another point guard on this list, Chris Paul. Again, one of the very few players on this list that doesn't have a ring, but his career and his resume, it can still be talked about, and people can still respect it, despite, the fact that he doesn't have a championship ring. And while he is known for having some of the biggest collapses in postseason history, his career in the regular season is just so good that you absolutely, you have to include him on a list like this, right? Like, he was an All-NBA player 11 times, and he was a 9-time All-Defensive player, a 2013 All-Star Game MVP, Rookie of the Year in 2006, and he is a 6-time steals leader along with a 5-time assist leader. Like, he's just amazing in the regular season. And him in the chat said he would rather have Russ. I actually don't agree with that at all. Like, Chris Paul, like, while he is a playoff choker, right? While he isn't that good in the postseason, realistically, he has done just about as much in the postseason as Russell Westbrook has done in the postseason. Aside from that one finals appearance that they both have, they haven't really done much in the postseason, right? So it's really you have to judge based off of their regular season. And Chris Paul, he usually brings a lot more positive to his teams in the regular season, more so than Russell Westbrook does. And I'm talking about, on a consistent basis. Like, there are so many years where you could point to where Chris Paul was the best point guard in the league. You can't really point to Russell Westbrook being the best point guard in the league except for just one season. Like, in every other season, he wasn't the best point guard in the league because, Steph Curry was still around. And I'm going to go ahead and continue finishing off this list. And then in the final segment, I'll actually, talk about some of the basketball moves and basketball news and free agent signings. I'll see if I have time for that in the next segment because, again, I'm just continuing off of this list. It's a lot more engaging and it's a lot more interesting with, at least I think it's a lot more interesting. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, I'm going to go ahead and finish off this top 25 list. Not top 25, but top 20 list. I apologize. Actually, no, it is a top 25 list. And I'm surprised that these lists, they take so long and they take up so many sections. Like, I'm very surprised that these lists take up such a long time in this thing. But I digress. Now, next player on this list, we left off at top 16. So this is the 16th best player on the top 25 list. It is Kawhi Leonard. Now, again, one of the few players on the team now. He has a championship, but he's one of the players that doesn't have an MVP. Like, aside from not having an MVP in the regular season, he has it all. Like, he has 2 finals MVPs, he is a 2-time champion, 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA selection, a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and, while he didn't really have a good tenure with the Clippers, he is one of the only players in the NBA's history to win a finals MVP for 2 different franchises. Like, he has a lot to bolster his career, and he has a pretty solid resume to, back up being the 16th best player on this list, right? And the only thing that is really like a problem with Kawhi is he alluded to this in the chat, is his injuries. Like, he hasn't been really available in the final stint of his career with the Clippers. And that's really been the only big problem with Kawhi Leonard. And, at least the biggest recent problem with Kawhi Leonard. Because, aside from that, Kawhi, he's been a dominant force throughout his entire career. Except for the first few years with San Antonio where he was still mainly focused on defense. He's really developed his game into a solid 2-way player. Next on this list, I'm actually very surprised he's even so high on this list, is Manu Ginobili. Now, I have a feeling that this is sort of one of the things that sort of bolsters his, standings might be his play in the Olympics, but at the same time, I don't really see him being ranked higher than the rest of these players on this list. Like, Tony Parker isn't even ranked higher than Manu Ginobili, and I don't really understand why Manu's ranked this high. Like, I understand during his time he was a fantastic, he was a great shooting guard, arguably one of the best shooting guards in the early NBA, the early 2000s. He invented he did invent the Euro step, and he popularized that Euro step. He is he is on the 75th, he's on the NBA 75 team. He is a 4-time NBA champion, a 2-time All-Star, and a 2-time All-NBA selection, as well as a 2007-2008 Sixth Man of the Year. Again, I don't think these awards and, his stature in the NBA should give him this high of a ranking. Like, yes, he should be ranked, but this high of a ranking, I don't think so. And again, I think one of the biggest reasons why he's made it so high is because of his Olympic career. And he was the EuroLeague Finals MVP in 2001, led Argentina to the gold medal, and was also able to win MVP during the 2004 Olympic Games, which is probably the biggest reason why he's ranked so high. But aside from that, if we're just looking at NBA career, don't think he should be ranked higher than the next player on this list, as well as some of the other players later on this list. Like Allen Iverson, I don't think he should be ranked higher than Iverson, but that's just me. Because while Iverson is fantastic on the offensive side, you could argue that Manu was a better presence on the defensive end. But one thing that Iverson has that Manu doesn't have is his MVPs. It's just one MVP, but that's still one more MVP than Manu has. And yes, Manu does have the edge on championships, by far has the edge. But I mean, Iverson, he's a Hall of Famer, and he is on the 75th anniversary team. And, he was an MVP in 2000, 2001, 11-time All-Star, a 3-time scoring champion, and a 6-time All-NBA, as well as a 2-time All-Star MVP. Now, maybe he's not ranked so high simply because, he doesn't really have the same longevity that Manu Ginobili has, because Manu Ginobili, he does have longevity, but at the same time, he has that longevity because he played coming off the bench for a majority of his time with the San Antonio Spurs, and he also spent a lot of his career on a loaded squad. I mean, the Spurs, they've been a loaded squad for the longest time, ever since they got Tim Duncan. They've just been loaded, and Manu Ginobili joining Tim Duncan, it's obviously just going to make the team better. And I also don't think Manu should be ranked higher than Anthony Davis, but that just might be a little bit of a bias, because I do understand that Anthony Davis only now recently won an NBA championship. But one of the things that I think should, sort of improve Anthony Davis's rating on this list is the fact that he is the only player in the history of basketball that has won a FIBA World Cup, an Olympic gold medal, an NCAA championship, and an NBA championship. He's the only player in the history of basketball to do all 4 of those things. And you know how a lot of people, they rank MJ so high because of his winning. Well, Anthony Davis has won in every single competitive level of sports. And it's not just American sports, it's international sports as well. So he's also on the NBA's top 75 team. He is a 1-time NBA champion, a 9-time All-Star, 2017 All-Star MVP, 4-time All-NBA, 4-time All-Defense, and a 3-time block leader. So again, he's just a very unstoppable force in the paint. One of the best power forwards during, this year for the Lakers, and this image right here, there were some talks that this man was better than Tim Duncan. Yes, there was an insane time, but there were talks that he was better than him, which is ridiculous. But aside from that, next player on this list is Jesus Shuttlesworth, Ray Allen. Before Steph Curry, this man was considered the best three-point shooter that the league has ever seen. He's made the top 75 list for the NBA. He is a two-time champion, one time with the Boston Celtics and the other time with the Miami Heat. He arguably owns one of the most clutch shots in NBA history. The three-pointer in the corner is like, it's still talked about to this day. Everyone still says, oh, Ray Allen saved LeBron's legacy, this, that, and the other. But like, it was a really tough shot. Very, very difficult shot. And again, best three-point shooter in the league before Steph Curry. He definitely deserves this ranking. Might be a little too high, but he deserves to be on this list. Now, the next player on this list is Tony Parker. Now, I mentioned that he should be ranked a little bit higher on this list, but he is still on this list. I think Manu and Tony Parker should switch spots. But that's just me. I mean, Tony Parker, he's been on the team for about just as long. He's a 4-time NBA champion, 2007 Finals MVP, 6-time All-Star, and a 4-time All-NBA. He definitely deserves this ranking. Maybe is somewhat on the same level as Chris Paul. Again, not entirely sure, because Chris Paul has been undoubtedly the best player on a majority of his teams, while Tony Parker was, either second or third best, but I digress. Now, again, he's a phenomenal athlete, and similar to how Manu Ginobili invented the Eurostep, this man revolutionized the floater and how point guards attack the basket. So, a very competent guard. Next is Draymond Green, the first ever all-you-can-do basketball player, honestly. Like, he does everything on the court. He's had his scoring years, he had his defensive years, he's had his assist years. It's like he does it all. And, a lot of people forget that he scored 35 points in Game 7 in 2016 when Steph Curry couldn't score more than 20 points. But, aside from that, Draymond Green, he's a 4-time All-Star, a 4-time NBA champion, 2-time All-NBA, 2016-17 Defensive Player, and an 8-time All-Defensive Team selection. Next, we have 3 more players on this list, and then this list is going to be over. So, 23 is Russell Westbrook, and, I'm sure all of you Westbrook fans are like, yes, he finally makes this list. But again, aside from the MVP in 2016 and 2017, his resume is it's not really there. I mean, he does have 9 All-NBA selections, and he is a 9-time All-Star. Yes, he has also led the assists in 3 times, and he has also led the league in points 2 times, and is also the all-time leader in triple-doubles. These are all counting stats. Aside from these counting stats, he hasn't really... in playoff success and in terms of playoff basketball, he is one of the very few players that doesn't have much success in the postseason. Like, himself individually and as the best player on the team. Like, while he wasn't the best player on the team when they went to the finals, he still made it to the finals. But again, it's never like he's been the best player on a competing team. And at the same time, it's not like most of his teams are able to compete, especially with his stint on the Lakers. That also really hurts his standings in this list. And again, like, while I do understand that, triple doubles, they are ridiculously impressive, it doesn't mean that they always help the team and his efficiency. There's all this. I always say that he brings a lot of good to a team, but he also brings a lot of bad to a team. And I feel like there are times where the good outweighs the bad, and then there are times where the bad outweighs the good. And you can't get a middle ground with him. You can't. You either get a good or a bad night, and that's really like the problem. Next player on this list is Pau Gasol. Again, another player that gets boosted for his national achievements. He is a 2-time NBA champion, 6-time All-Star, a 4-time All-NBA, 2001 Rookie of the Year, and again, he's just, a phenomenal player in the Olympics, and, his time with Spain is definitely, one of the best times of his career. And him in the chat, no. Paul George is not on this list. The next player on this list is definitely very controversial, but the next player is actually Luka Doncic. Like, he is 25th on this list of players. Now, I know that's absolutely insane, but when you really think about it, Luka, I understand, the recency bias and him making it all the way to the finals, but if you really think about it, he already has more finals appearances than Paul George. Yeah, like, I know it's insane that Luka's even on this list, but at the same time, he does have so many accolades, and he does have a lot of achievements, and he's made it to the finals, and like, again, he's been talked about in the league. Like, there's actually conversation about him being the best player in the league. When Paul George was in his prime, he was never really considered the best player in the NBA, as much as Luka Doncic is considered the best player in the NBA. Now, partly has to do with the fact that Paul George played with LeBron. I understand that. But in this era, Luka Doncic basically is LeBron. Like, think of it that way. I mean, he's a 5-time All-Star. He's a 1-time scoring champion. He's a 4-time All-NBA. He won Rookie of the Year. He's been in MVP talks several times. And really, that's the only, like, concrete thing that Paul George has on his career. Like, we hear it constantly. We always hear the fact that, oh, Paul George, he had that 1 year on OKC where he almost won the MVP, right? We're talking about almost winning MVP seasons instead of, seasons where he actually won something. And there haven't been that many seasons where he won something. And on top of that, Luka Doncic, he also has a Western Conference, and a Western Conference Finals MVP, right? Like, that is, again, it is a relatively new award, but it's not like Luka Doncic isn't, like, I understand it is a little bit crazy, right? Like, it does sound very, very crazy, but, I understand how great Paul George was on the Pacers. And we also have TJ in the chat. He says, I don't hate Luka being on this list, but let's not forget young Paul George was a killer. Yes, I understand that. That is that's why I'm very shocked that he's not on this list. Like, but again, we also have to remember that this is also 21st century basketball, so this takes into account everything else that he's done. If it was just based off of his early years in Indiana, I have no doubt that he would make this list. But since this is, just an accumulation of things, like, I mean, he has several first-round disappointments. I really think that 3-1 lead that he blew with the Clippers is really hindering him on this list. Like, there's a lot of these, and Luka Doncic, he's never really had many playoff series where he's expected to win. Unlike Paul George, where he's expected to win. Like, it's really difficult to, scale both of those and, like, take both of their positives and take both of their flaws. Like, Paul George, he has the defense and the offense, but, Luka probably has far better offense than Paul George is ever going to even get in his career. And on top of that, one of the things that Luka has above him is, like, just constant record-breaking performances. Like, Paul George, I can't really name many record-breaking performances that Paul George has as opposed to Luka Doncic, because, again, Luka, while he is relatively young, he is, like, most of his awards, or his accomplishments, youngest player to do this, youngest player to do that. He also, I remember there was a game where he had 70 points. I mean, there was that. There was also a game where he scored or assisted on over 80% of the Dallas Mavericks' points, right? Which is ridiculous, especially for someone so young. He's also, been the leader in playoff points per game for the longest time. And again, I feel like, there is an argument for him being in the top 25. Now, whether it's him or Paul George, that's still up for debate. But, I think this list it's relatively solid. Again, it's crazy how someone like Luka Doncic is able to even be on this list and is able to even be considered, while Paul George is just, is completely absent. So, that's basically all that I have for this segment, and, well, these 3 segments, I should say. And that's basically it for the podcast. That was a very, very long segment and very long explaining. But, aside from that, him in the chat, he has some more things to say. No, T-Mac is not on this list. And, again, yes, there are going to be a lot of players on this list that, they just haven't made it this list. But I can answer both T-Mac and Vince Carter. So, for one, Luka Doncic has more finals appearances than both of them. Like, Vince Carter, he never made it to the finals. T-Mac only made it to the finals once in 2013. He wasn't even the best player. And on top of that, T-Mac, he's had injuries over his career. Vince Carter has always been, and one of the things that they both have in common is that they both come up short in the postseason. This happens all the time. And I think T-Mac's career is like a little bit too short and not full of enough accolades and accomplishments in order to be considered to be on this list. But I do understand why you would feel like he should be on this list, because he's never made it out of the first round when he was the number one option. He's had several playoff series where he just underperformed. Vince Carter, the same thing applies with him. Several playoff series where he just underperforms. And I understand that he's had some really good years as both a Net and a Raptor, and he's just the best dunker that the league has seen. I don't think being called the best dunker allows you to get put in a position of being the best athlete, or being on a list of the best NBA players in the 21st century. Then again, I also can understand how there's a possibility that the ESPN people that are making this list are trying to be a little bit more controversial, because ESPN does have a history of being rather controversial in their lists, and purposely putting certain players on their lists as opposed to purposely excluding players off of their lists due to reasons to sort of start controversy. I don't think that's I don't really think that's the case, because really, where would Vince Carter and T-Mac go? I don't think Vince Carter and T-Mac are better all-time than someone like Russell Westbrook. And Russell Westbrook is all the way down at 23. Like, as much as I don't like Westbrook, I am willing to understand that, T-Mac, or he had a better career than T-Mac, as well as having a better career than Vince. But, that leaves only 2 spots left. And I think there's an argument for both Pau Gasol and Luka Doncic. But that's just me. So, again, aside from that, that is all I have for this podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all I have for you today on this final segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that